Hanna, welcome. We will be also joined by Viola Kramon von Taubadel, member of the European Parliament, of its Foreign Affairs Committee, also member of the delegation to the EU-Ukraine Parliamentary Association Committee, and the former EU policy speaker of the Green Caucus in the German Bundestag. Also, Jan-Philipp Albrecht, who is already with us, co-president of the Heinrich Böll Foundation, and András Rácz, associate fellow in the German Council on Foreign Relations. And my name is Daniel Hegedűs. I work as transatlantic fellow for the German Marshall Fund of the United States, and it's my utmost pleasure to be able to moderate this meeting today. Just very briefly about the housekeeping rules. So we will start with a moderated discussion on the topic of Ukraine's European prospects in approximately 45 to 50 minutes. And then we will open up a public Q&A. So I would like to ask you, ladies and gentlemen, to prepare your questions, because you will definitely have the opportunity to address them to our distinguished speakers. Since the 24th of February, Ukraine has been fighting a historic war for its independence, for its statehood, for its right to self-determination, and also for its sheer existential survival against the Russian aggression. And I think it would be an understatement to say that this war changed many things in Europe. But it definitely changed the European Union's relations with Ukraine. The country is not part of the association trio anymore. As a matter of fact, no such thing as association trio exists. The Ukrainian government applied for EU membership on February 28. And on the 23rd of June, the European Council granted Ukraine a candidate status in the European Union. And I'm convinced that this is more than just a symbolic move, because Ukraine's European integration is practically unfolding before our very eyes at a rather fast pace. Ukraine entered a completely custom-free trade relationship with the European Union, so practically the free movement of goods is already achieved, even if officially only for a temporal period. Ukraine became connected to the European electricity grid and electricity market, and the European Commission is contemplating with the idea how Ukraine could become also part of the roaming-free European telecommunication zone. So Ukraine's European integration is not a matter for the future, but it's unfolding in these present days. However, we also know from the experiences in the Western Balkans that EU geopolitical interests may fade, that reform enthusiasm of candidate countries may weaken, and that political fatigue can paralyze accession processes. And against that background, I would like to ask you to start with a sort of reality check, perhaps. And the same question to all of our speakers would be first that what is, according to your opinion, a both desirable but also realistic and feasible scenario for Ukraine's European integration in the next 5 years? And what should the European Union, its member states, and Ukraine do and achieve to realize the scenario you desire? And potentially we could start with you, Ms. Hopko.
Thank you so much for organizing this important discussion. And I think really historical event happened this June when Ukraine received a candidate status. And I remember in May and June when we traveled within our International Center for Ukrainian Victory to key capitals, Berlin, Paris, The Hague, also Brussels, to convince the decision makers that granting Ukraine a candidate status does not contradict the enlargement process of the Western Balkans, because all countries will be equal in this process, and Ukraine met the criteria. So actually we deserve, not just because of Russian full-scale escalation, but also because the reforms we implemented after the Euromaidan dignity revolution, it's also very convincing just to grant us the EU candidate status. And it also was a geopolitical signal to Russian Federation and to Kremlin, which also determine Ukraine's victory in Russian aggression, weapon supply, sanctions, and EU perspective, and I do hope also NATO after Ukrainian victory. It's also not just symbolic, but it's also one of the key elements of our victory. And also behind the Russian war against Ukraine and actually Putin's attempt to return Ukraine back in Russian sphere of influence, given a European perspective, just reaffirmed that EU is a geopolitical player, which is, I think, really important for European Union to be positioned not just economic union. And actually today, Ukrainians are united and mobilized as never before, and 91% of the population support the EU integration. 93% of Ukrainians believe and confident that Ukraine is winning the war, and the victory in Ukraine's view is full restoration of territorial integrity and sovereignty in the internationally recognized borders 1991. So Ukrainians are fighting, risking, and giving their lives to remain independent country with European values. And I think it's really important that we are defending not just the independence of Ukraine, but also we are contributing to global, I would say, security, not just preventing the devastation going beyond Ukrainian borders, and not allowing authoritarian regime to attack in hybrid warfare methods. So, and also, if we discuss about, you already mentioned roaming and others. So Ukraine is already deeply integrated into the EU internal market. 63% of the objectives under the association agreement completed. Ukraine has proven that it is able to proceed with sectoral integration at the accelerated pace, even in time of Russian full-scale war genocide. So you mentioned ENTSO-E energy system. So after I think also it's very important that Ukraine joining the European continental energy grid, and especially with what's happening now with nuclear terror, when Russian military forces are in the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant, and recent attacks on Yuzhno-Ukrainska nuclear power plant. So it's a terror, nuclear terror, and we are advocating. I just came back from Washington, D.C. I visited last week with the idea, with the key goals to recognize Russian aggression as a genocide and designate Russia as a state sponsor of terrorism. And after today's decision of Putin, he needs 300,000 more soldiers to die for what? What does Russia stand for? Just to be killed for what is the biggest idea of this? So I think Putin lost Ukraine and this higher level of support, 91% of the population for EU integration. It's also important. Also, let's mention the trade and economy, new market and business for the EU, and as a guarantor of food security to European states, we really fight very tough to deblocade the Black Sea and demilitarize, because grain deal, it's a just partial solution. It's not a real solution in long term. And I'm sure that Ukraine, with around 32 million hectares of land, with almost 24% of all EU arable land, it's really could become a global security or food security guarantor, which is really important. And Green Deal, climate change, everyone is talking here. But I made also, there were also discussion today in the morning about the role of renewables in helping democracy to counter the fossil fuel authoritarian regime and what is happening now with energy crisis in EU, which Russia provoked, because the weaponization of energy with gas, and we were fighting against the Nord Stream 2 for many years. So it's really important that Ukraine with renewable Ukraine has a higher potential for renewables, and potential also increased to 70% by 2050. So there are many other facts where we could say that Ukraine, as a not candidate state, but in the nearest future as a member of the EU, it's will be, how to say, for both sides. So we will strengthen the EU as also spiritual or basket of Europe, not just it used to be in last century a food basket of Europe, but also as a values defender, also as a security, because Ukraine armed forces are de facto European armed forces. And it's really important that we will share our unique practical experience in conventional war and hybrid warfare. So the plan of Ukrainian president, our government with Vice Prime Minister Olha Stefanishyna, after candidate status, to implement 7 commitments and all legislation, and to, how to say, to progress, and that after candidate status, the membership will not take, like for other countries, decades. And I think it's in the interest of both Ukraine and the European Union, because I do believe that European Union becoming a geopolitical player is in the interest of democracy, democracy sustainability in long term.